It's Jared from Strongroots Farm. Today we're going to talk about stockpiling grass or pastures. Now, if you're not familiar with this term, this is where you take off a section of your farm, perhaps rope it off with some single strand electric, and you let it grow up and stockpile to use later. Now today I'll take you through the video and I'll go through every aspect of why, the how, all those kind of things. And I'll break it down with some analogies so that you don't need a degree in agronomy necessarily or horticulture to understand why and how and when you should be doing this on your farm. And I think the main thing I'm going to talk about that I'm seeing some people getting this wrong is, should you be doing this at all? So we're going to talk about it all. Stick around. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining us as we get going here today on stockpiling pastures. I'm mainly going to talk about cattle, but this is the same for sheep, goats, whatever you're grazing on pasture. As we get into this, there are many different factors on when you should start. And that's the main thing we're going to talk about today is, when do you start stockpiling? When do you start segregating off part of your farm so that you don't graze it? For me, I look at it as a drop dead date. After this date, we no longer graze the areas that we want to graze during the winter. Now, if you've watched my channel very long, you know that I am not a year-round grazer. In fact, I would rather stockpile manure to better my farm than stockpile grass. And so there's a video icon, looks something like this. It'll be down in the descriptions. So if you're thinking about year-round grazing, if you're listening to other people and they're telling you you should be year-round grazing, I made this video about the disadvantages, where I tell you why you should or should not be doing that. So please check that video out. It will be very important, but it will not affect this video per se. The other crucial piece of information you're going to need to determine this date for you on your homestead or small farm is when, based off of how much rain and a lot of different factors. So I'm going to post this right here, split the screen, and show you that I'm in Georgetown, Ohio, which is on the very southern tip of Ohio. We get an average rainfall somewhere between 45 and 50 inches of rain per year. The national average is around 35. So we get quite a bit of rain here. Our averages during the summer on temperature are in the low 80s, sometimes high 70s in a year. Now, this has been an unusually hot year for us, so we're probably above 85 for an average for the summer. In the winter, we have about 1 month of freezing weather. So below freezing, where water freezes and it causes us problems with our cattle. We have about 1 month of that to deal with, but there are 3 to 4 months of pretty cold weather where grass lays dormant. So we don't get year-round growth here. All the numbers today, all the discussion today will come off of these numbers, and you're going to have to translate it to your environment. If you're in the US, we are in lane 6B, if you can kind of look across the map when you look that up. All right, so as we get into the details of this, let's start with the why, because that's probably the easiest to explain and most people have a good handle on. You're stockpiling grass or pasture in a lane, whether it's a paddock, whether it's an area next to your barns, wherever it would be. You're stockpiling a section of your farm to graze at a later point, allowing it to get taller and deeper during that time in the fall. It will put nutrients and energy down into the ground, but you're doing this typically to save on hay or to allow your cattle to stay on pasture longer so that you're not forced to feed them grain or perhaps in a barn. You want to stay out in the pasture dropping manure out here. It's less to clean up. Lots of different factors of why, but those are the reasons why. For us, we are not year-round grazers. Like I said, we do this to extend our winter, extend our grazing deeper into the winter. So our goal is usually Christmas. If I can graze 100% grass, 0 hay till December 15th towards Christmas, I've done a good job for the year, but there comes a pendulum that gets changed with weather. And so weather is a huge factor that will change this date. And by this date, I mean the last day of grazing. So today is September 9th. I'm starting to have to do this, and this is why I'm making this video. You have to think about this now, today, on your small farmer homestead, because we're getting close to being a drop dead date of grazing. Meaning, if I graze this paddock today, I'm probably not going to be able to winter graze it. It's going to be gone and it's not going to have enough time to grow back. So it's coming a little later for us, but how do you determine this date for yourself? All right, so first we want to figure out when is our drop dead growth date. Okay, and this is going to change from year to year based on weather and rainfall, and obviously location is going to be completely different. So I'm just going to give you some scenarios and then you're going to have to figure this out. Drop dead date for me is November 1st, meaning somewhere between November 1st and November 15th, whatever grass I have left on my pasture, that's all there's going to be. It's going to go dormant and it's not going to specifically grow. It may grow a little, but not enough to really add anything forage wise. So we use November 1st because it's a good average date. On a good year, we're probably still getting decent growth November 15th, but on a bad year, it's more like October 15th if it gets cold quicker or we're in a drought like we are right now. So we're going to pick November 1st as our drop dead growth date. Next, we want to work our way backwards. So we're looking at, okay, November 1st is when it's going to stop growing. How many days of growing do I need prior to this drop dead growth date to get enough forage that I can then graze at a later date? This is kind of hard to determine for me to tell you what to do. But on my farm, 60 days is a pretty good amount of time. If I'm off of a paddock for 60 days and we have decent rainfall and decent weather, I'm going to get enough growth that I could then graze it again. So we're going to look at, okay, we've got November 1st. Let's go back. Now we're at September 1st. Once again, I said today was September 9th. So if I graze it on September 9th, I'm pretty much saying I expect there to be growth until November 9th here on my farm. So you're going to take that growth cycle on your farm. You're in Texas, it's very different. You're in Missouri, it's similar, but a little bit different. When is winter coming? When does winter typically come in your area? All those factors. With us, we want to add 10 to 20% inefficiency on that date. So meaning I want 60 days of growth, I'm going to need to add another 6 to 12 days on top of that for inefficiencies. Now, where do these inefficiencies come from? Okay, so the first inefficiency is sunlight. We're all aware of this, time change, all that kind of stuff. The hours in the day are shorter in this time of year than they were in June and July, the longest portion of the year. So with our grass getting less hours of sunlight, it's not going to grow as much as our typical 60-day rotations. So there's about a 10 to 20% that the light adds into that factor. The second factor, of course, is heat. And so you're not going to have enough warm days where the ground is over 65, down in the soil where the roots are. So as the temperatures go down, our grass grows slower because of the temperature. So that's factor number 2 that may cause you to extend your dates even more if you're north of me. And the third main factor that is going to cause us to add this is the inefficiency or nutrient density of the grass when the cattle eat it. So this is kind of the main one that you really need to think about. When you're looking at this, a paddock size, let's just say you pick a 100 by 100 paddock size summertime or during a spring flush. And even if the paddock looks to have the exact same amount of grass, meaning if I baled it, it would create the exact same amount of tonnage in the summer or spring as it is prepared for you in the fall going into winter. It will take 20% more grass or somewhere in that adds to this 20% because the cattle are going to eat more because the grass does not have the nutrient density that it did during the warmer months of the year where it got better rainfall. So I have found that whatever my paddock size was in May, my paddock sizes in the fall need to be 10 to 20% larger. A lot of the reason due to that grass. It's just not as nutrient dense. So as we come out here and look at this paddock, which I'm getting ready to graze, it will be the last time we graze it this year until the winter. You'll look, I've still got some flower buds on my clovers, but most of it has turned brown. But there's a good mix of grasses, good diversity out here. It has become, and it typically does here on our farm in the fall, more fescue ridden percentage-wise than anything else. But we have quite a bit of height. As I went out and pulled stuff, I had some 24-inch height on grass. This has set for 60 days. I topped it with a bush hog at 60 days. And then it probably hasn't been grazed for 96, 98 days. I'll have to look back at my chart. But we haven't been on this for quite a while grazing. So we've got good growth in this paddock. And so when I look at this paddock, I have a few options. Obviously, I'm gonna graze it today, and I'm gonna get off of it pretty quick because I wanna graze it again in the winter. But we have a few options. You can graze it and graze it down to the nubs and say, okay, it's gonna be done. We might get 1/2 grazing off of it, meaning I'm gonna be double my paddock size, but I will get another graze before I go into the winter, but I'm not gonna plan on winter grazing it. So that's option one. Option two is we can keep them off of it right now, and we can bale it, and we can store that grass, feeding that grass as a hay or a haylage, and bale it all up. So we're gonna get a third cutting or a fall cutting of hay, and we can store it and feed it to them. Or we can graze it real quick, which is what I'm gonna do, and then start stockpiling for the winter. And I'm actually running a little late. So I'm pushing the numbers here, hoping that I can get a little bit more just because there's so much growth here. I'm gonna take it only down to about 6 or 8 inches. They're only gonna be in here real quick. The paddock size is gonna be bigger so that they don't take as much, and it will end up looking like this over here that we baled, which is anywhere between 8 and 12 inches now. This will all be stockpiled. They will not graze on that side of this line. Okay, so you have those three options. Why would we stockpile? And this is the main thing I want to challenge people on. Stockpiling versus baling. And that's why I brought that up as an issue. So if I baled this and put it in my barn to feed it, is it better than stockpiled grass? This is where I told you I'm gonna kind of break this down to an elementary level, and it's not super scientific, so that you don't need an education in agronomy or horticulture or whatever you would think about when you're looking at getting a college degree in grass management. So we're gonna use a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being junky and 10 out of 10 being the best hay or grass we ever had. So think about your pastures, the best paddock you had all year, the perfect paddock, perfect legumes versus grasses. That's a 10 out of a 10. So think about that paddock as being your 10 out of 10. Now, if you took that paddock and you cut it for hay and you snipped it off, whether you're baling it wet and using haylage or whether you're storing it dry in a barn, when you cut it and let it dry down, nutrient-wise, it automatically comes, let's say, an 8. Made up numbers, don't kill me on this, okay? So it automatically is gonna lose some nutrient density. It would obviously be better to graze it in the pasture as a 10 out of 10 paddock than it would be to store it up as an 8. Now, because you're probably storing hay in the spring, the way you store changes that number even more. So if you bale it into haylage, there's pros and cons, and there's people that will argue this, but let's say because I stored hay in the spring as haylage and I wrapped it and I stored it in a good location and it didn't overheat, it had the perfect amount of moisture. Let's say now the nutrient density, the quality of that grass only drops to a 7. If I store it in a barn, dry and covered, it could save the same. It would fall to a 7 due to time, or maybe a 6 out of 10 for quality. If I stored it outside, some people say it's the same. If you store outside versus inside, I 100% disagree. I think your quality we're gonna rate that as a 4 or 5 out of 10 now because we stored that hay outside. My reason being for that, yes, the core grass inside that bale may be the same quality, but that outer 10% that has been weathered on out in the rain, out in the sun, you're gonna lose that. You're gonna lose that as a hay or silage or grass product nutrients to feed your cattle or whatever. You're gonna lose that because it's gonna have weather damage. Most cattle, and sheep especially, will not even eat that outer ring. You'll know if you've done this long enough, it ends up in the bottom of the hay ring, or it ends up as a part on your pasture if you're unrolling. So our hay, nutrient density, the quality of that grass is now down to a 4 or 5. Now that we've got this rating scale out of the way for stored nutrients in form of hay, why are we stockpiling? Well, stockpiling grass is not 10 out of 10. This paddock that you're looking at that we saw on camera, it's not the best paddock I've had all year. In the spring flush, when I had tons of legumes and more orchard grasses and my chicory was in thick and everything was there perfect, that was my 10 out of 10. The grass I have today is probably more like a 6 or 7, especially if I stockpile it until winter. So if I save that for them till winter, the longer I wait to graze it, the further into winter I get, the grass goes dormant, it begins to dry out, the cold weather starts to hurt it, and it is falling from a 7, which it's at today, down to a 6, 5, 4, you see what I mean, until it completely goes below what our stored hay is. So to boil that all down, there's a lot of different factors that will change this decision for you, and you need to think about it for yourself. But I'm gonna tell you now what we do and why we do it. So we'll get a little panoramic view of the farm here. Lots of open pastures. We have about 3 acres that is what we would call silvo pastures in the woods, and there's some good grasses and they can come out to paddocks. And then we work our way back up towards our barns, which you see back behind me here. I have water throughout the whole farm, but I don't have water that won't freeze throughout the whole farm. I do have electricity at the barn, so we could use a heater, but there are some frost-free automatic waters up there in a couple places that prevent water from freezing all year long. So around my barns, I have about 4 acres, and then we can graze, and I can turn that automatic water, we can graze about 8 acres off of that automatic water that will not freeze. So that 8 acres that we have that we're gonna graze and feed hay at the same time, that is automatically stockpiled. That's automatically saved because I can graze all of that from the water that won't freeze. Now, there are many different ways to keep water from freezing. One preferable way that you'll probably see a lot on YouTube is letting the water trickle over. We can't do that here. We pay for water here, and so we don't want to waste water by letting it trickle over in order to prevent it from freezing. So you can bust ice. You can come out every morning and bust ice and let those containers fill back up, have frost-free hydrants. There's lots of ways that you can get further, or we could get further away from our barns by busting ice. We don't like to do that though, because we are part-time farmers and we work a job, or I do. So I come out and I don't want to have to come out at 5 a.m. before I go to work and bust ice every morning. So that freezing point of water now kind of becomes a deadline for us. That deadline changes every year, and it's just the weather, and it's what you have to deal with. But we typically say Christmas, or somewhere between Christmas and December 15th is that deadline. I will graze out here until ice freezes and does not thaw, meaning I don't mind if it freezes overnight, crusts over my water container, and then by 9 a.m. it's broke loose and they can break it with their nose. But if they can't get a drink without me physically busting an inch of ice off, we can't be out here. We gotta be up there where they can get water without me physically doing the work. All right, now that you have that, back to stockpiling. So we've got the 8 acres that I can graze without water freezing. We know my drop dead date of growth is November 1st. We figured out September 1st is kind of my drop dead date on a good year for grazing. So anything I want to graze prior to that, I have to stockpile. Now I'm going to look from December 15th, which is, I'm going to call that my ice date, that I can touch the 8 acres and get water. Now we're going to say from November 1st to December 15th, my ice date, how much grass do I need to stockpile? That's when I'm going to use stockpiled grass. So my grass isn't going to grow anymore. I have to have it stockpiled for them to get me until water will freeze. That's the whole goal of stockpiling. And we do this mainly to save money on hay, which is the #1 cost associated with feeding cattle through the winter, especially here on our farm. We can graze all year long on our land that we have here because we have good stocking density, good rotations, but we have to buy hay or make it ourselves. So that cost, whether it's owning equipment or buying in the hay, is my number one cost. So if I can eliminate that, that is the profit or a larger profit that comes to my small farm. All right, so that's a lot of talk, and hopefully you got all that and you understand it. So now when I'm out here planning, I am planning for 45 days of stockpile plus my 10 to 20% of inefficiencies. Can I unroll some hay during that time period? Yes. So if I am wrong on my numbers, I'm low on my stockpile, I will start to strip graze, as I've made videos on, and we will unroll hay at the same time we're eating the stockpile grass, which we'll probably do anyways just to kind of keep those daily gains going. So I got to plan for, I'm going to plan for 60 days, but really it's going to be more like 51, 52 is what I'm educating or how I'm telling people to do this. But more is better, okay? So if you have more stockpile that you need, you can always bush hog it down and feed it back. You can always leave it for the spring. You can always come out and graze it when the ground is frozen. So they can walk farther when the ground is frozen without tearing up stuff. And so that's what we're looking at. How much do we need? Well, you're gonna do the same thing I do, which is I take a measurement or a idea of how large my paddocks are, and I say I need this many paddocks to get me for those 45 to 60 days, and I start segregating them off. And I would recommend that you kind of rotate where you stockpile, but it's really hard on my farm to do a very good rotation because of that water issue. So we're gonna say from this last water, which is right over here, this front half of the farm, and then I have found that I need to go about 4 more paddocks, get 4 or 5 more days out of that. More. I'm gonna go a little bit further this year, and I'm gonna rope that off. And so we're gonna graze up here real quick to cut this down, and then everything else, if we get good rain, when our fall flush comes in, I will have enough stockpiled grass, which means the back probably half to 2/3 of my farm, I'm gonna have to graze that until November 1st to November 15th, as far as I can, get as close to that as I can, and just continue to stay back there. Now, if I'm wrong and I don't have enough grass because of rain, I'm gonna have to break into my stockpile, which means more hay and less profit. If I'm better, if I did better and we get good rain and good growth and there's more grass back there, I can either buy calves for cheaper in the fall, put more calves on my farm, which probably won't happen because I've got bit a few times with that, or I can try to stay out longer. I can inconvenience myself and come out and bust ice. I can try to put some electrical power to it. I can do something to try to graze it, or I can simply leave it, bush hog it down, or leave it for the spring, and that's where I would start grazing in the spring. All right, I'll take you through a recap because there was a lot of talking there. We're gonna determine how long we wanna graze. Are we gonna year-long graze, or are we gonna graze from one point until water freezes? How long are we gonna graze? Then you're gonna determine your end of growth date. For us, it's November 1st. Nothing grows, we don't get any significant growth after November 1st, depending on weather. Then we're gonna work back. This is how long we need to graze out there until our grass is less nutrient dense than our hay. And at that point, you will unroll and still continue to graze if you're a year-round grazer, like Greg Judy. Whatever your method is gonna be, you're gonna work your days back from that. You know why you're grazing, why you're stockpiling. That will determine how much stockpiling you need. Next, you're gonna determine which farm, if you're a big guy, or which part of your farm you're going to stockpile. You'll mark it off. We go ahead and set us a line so they never come this side of that line until we pass that date, and you just let it grow. And then you start taking notes. And I like YouTube for this because I go back and watch my own videos to figure out what the heck I did. But you need to take pictures and notes and figure out what you did, because if this is your first time stockpiling, you're gonna get it wrong. And that might have sounded like a jerk, but I'm not being a jerk. I want you to understand it's okay to be wrong. We have probably tried to stockpile for winter grazing for the last 6 to 7 years. Until last year, and last year I made a video where I said, this is the best I've ever done. Last year was the best year I'd ever had stockpiling grass. We grazed longer and we grazed better grass than we ever had before. It took me 6 years until I could say that. I either left too much, like this field, which we're getting ready to graze right now as well. I either left too much and I caused myself fall labor on the bush hog by trying to feed it back to keep the weeds out and to allow good growth during the winter as far as nutrient return, those kind of things, so that the spring started off better. Or, which has happened most of the time, I thought I was better than I really was. I ended up feeding hay early, and the next thing you know, the hay that I had planned for the winter didn't go as far as I wanted it to go. So I had to buy more hay, and that's where I've come to this notion of it's almost better to save on hay than it is to buy more hay and add more cows. So I'm learning it's better to save money sometimes than it is to try to add 2 or 3 extra head and make a little bit more. Well, I hope that helps you. Take notes. That's a big thing. Figure out what you want to do the math, take pictures, take notes. Pictures on your phone that are saved by a date will help you in the following year. Please take that advice, because if you're going to do this long term, it's going to be continual growth of getting better and better. Well, there you have it. Hope this video helps. Thanks so much for watching. Comment down below, ask questions. I have a few more videos coming up based on comments and questions. So one video is going to be on raising cattle on small acreage. I've had a lot of questions about that. Another video is going to come out specifically about stockers, raising stocker cattle. What does that even mean? I talked about that a little bit at the beginning of our video. And so people are asking me, is that the best way to go when they're starting out? And so I'm going to make a video specifically about raising stocker cattle. So please look out for that. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
Please like the video and subscribe.